Michael stopped walking when he saw Amara crying as she handed over her grandmother's necklace to the pawn shop owner, her daughter watching with 8-year-old understanding that Mommy was selling her most precious possession so they could afford the medicine that would let her breathe. And in that moment, he knew his billions meant nothing if he couldn't help this family who reminded him of his own mother's sacrifices 30 years ago. Now, before we continue, have you clicked the subscribe button? If you haven't, please do it now, and please don't forget to like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're listening from. Let's get back to the story. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows on Detroit's Corktown district as Amara sat on the bench outside Citywide Pawn Shop, her hands trembling as she held the delicate gold necklace that represented the last connection to her grandmother's love and her own buried dreams of financial stability. At 30, Amara carried herself with the weary grace of someone who'd learned to find strength in impossible circumstances. Her clothes were clean but worn, her posture spoke of someone carrying burdens too heavy for her frame, and her eyes held the particular exhaustion that came from making daily choices between necessities when every option felt inadequate. "Mama, are you sure we have to sell Grammy's necklace?" 8-year-old Zara asked, her voice carrying the wisdom that came from watching her mother sacrifice everything to keep their small family afloat. "Baby, your medicine costs $300, and we don't have $300, Amara explained, with the honest directness she'd learned was kinder than false reassurances. "Grammy would want us to use her necklace to help you breathe better." Zara nodded with acceptance that broke Amara's heart. No child should understand financial desperation so clearly, but circumstances had forced mature comprehension of realities that other 8-year-olds never had to consider. Across the street, Michael Sterling adjusted his expensive suit and checked his phone for the 3rd time, confirming he was early for a meeting with city planning officials about his company's expansion project. At 34, he possessed the understated confidence that came from building Sterling Tech Solutions from a college dorm room into a billion-dollar enterprise that employed over 2,000 people. But something about the scene outside the pawn shop made him pause mid-stride. The mother and daughter sitting on the bench radiated the particular desperation he remembered from his own childhood, when his single mother had pawned wedding rings and furniture to afford medications for his younger sister's chronic illness. What would you do if you witnessed someone facing the same impossible choice your own family had faced, but now you possessed the resources to eliminate their crisis with a gesture that would mean nothing to you financially, but everything to them emotionally? "Come on, baby," Amara said, standing with the resignation of someone who'd exhausted every other option. "Let's go get this done." Michael watched them enter the pawn shop, his business instincts warring with childhood memories that made this stranger's crisis feel deeply personal. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant, but he ignored it, drawn toward a situation that reminded him why success felt meaningful only when it enabled helping others. Through the pawn shop's grimy window, Michael saw Amara place the necklace on the counter, while Zara watched with 8-year-old solemnity. The pawnbroker examined the piece with casual indifference, probably offering a fraction of its actual value to someone who had no choice but to accept whatever price he named. "This is 14-karat gold," the pawnbroker said dismissively, "but it's old-fashioned styling. I can give you $75. Amara's face crumpled as she realized the family treasure she'd protected through years of hardship wasn't worth enough to cover Zara's medication. "It's worth at least $200, she protested weakly. "Not in today's market," the broker replied with the callousness of someone who profited from other people's desperation. "$75, take it or leave it." Michael felt anger rising in his chest as he watched someone exploit a mother's crisis for maximum profit. Without fully considering the implications, he pushed through the pawn shop door. "Excuse me," Michael said, his voice carrying authority that made everyone in the shop turn toward him. "I couldn't help but overhear. What's the medication cost you're trying to cover?" Amara looked up with the startled expression of someone unaccustomed to strangers' interest in her personal struggles. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "No, But I know what it's like to need medicine you can't afford, Michael replied honestly. My sister had asthma when we were kids. I remember what those medications cost. The admission created unexpected connection across the barriers of wealth and circumstance that separated their current lives from their shared experience of childhood medical crises. Sir, this is a private transaction, the pawnbroker interjected, sensing interference that might cost him profit. Actually, Michael said, pulling out his wallet, I'd like to make this lady an offer for her necklace. Fair market value. He placed $500 on the counter, more than enough to cover Zara's medication and return Amara's family heirloom to her possession. Sir, I can't accept charity from a stranger, Amara said with dignity that impressed Michael more than any business negotiation ever had. It's not charity, Michael replied. It's one parent who remembers being in your situation, helping another parent who's there now. Consider it paying forward kindness that someone showed my family when we needed it most. As Amara stared at money that would solve her immediate crisis, while preserving her most precious possession, and Michael found himself more emotionally invested in this family's welfare than any business deal he'd ever negotiated, both realized they were standing at the beginning of something that would transform their understanding of what it meant to choose compassion over convenience, and why some connections felt inevitable even when they began with strangers helping strangers through impossible moments. I don't understand, Amara said, staring at the money on the counter. Why would you help people you don't even know? Michael looked at Zara, seeing his younger sister in the way the child watched her mother navigate crisis with quiet bravery. Because someone helped my family once, and I never forgot how it felt to have a stranger care about our problems. The pawnbroker cleared his throat impatiently. Are we doing business or not? We're not, Michael said firmly, sliding the $500 toward Amara. The necklace isn't for sale. This is for your daughter's medication. Amara's eyes filled with tears as she realized she could keep her grandmother's necklace and still afford Zara's medicine. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Michael replied. Just take care of your daughter, and maybe someday help someone else when you're in a position to do it. As they left the pawn shop together, Zara tugged on Michael's sleeve. Mister, are you an angel? Mama says angels help people when they really need it. Michael knelt to Zara's eye level, remembering his own childhood fascination with adults who seemed to possess magical powers to solve problems. I'm just someone who knows what it's like to worry about someone you love. Do you have kids? Zara asked with 8-year-old directness. No, Michael replied, something in his tone suggesting loneliness that wealth couldn't fill. But I had a sister who had asthma like you, and I know how scary it can be. Amara studied Michael's face, seeing genuine emotion rather than performative charity. Sir, I still don't know your name. Michael, he replied, deliberately omitting his last name to avoid the complications that came with revealing his wealth and status. I'm Amara, and this is Zara, she said, feeling the need to introduce her daughter to the man whose kindness had just solved their crisis. Are you from Detroit? Born and raised, Michael said truthfully. East Side, until my mum could afford to move us somewhere safer. The admission revealed shared experience of Detroit's economic struggles rather than the privileged background Amara might have assumed from his expensive clothes and casual generosity. We live on the East Side too, Zara said excitedly. Maybe we're neighbors. Michael felt his heart warming to this child, whose enthusiasm reminded him of his sister at the same age, before illness and family stress had forced too much maturity too quickly. What happens when a spontaneous act of kindness creates connection that both people need but neither expected? Sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin with strangers who recognize something of themselves in each other's struggles. Michael, Amara said carefully, would you like to get coffee? I'd like to hear about your sister if you don't mind sharing. It might help me understand what Zara's dealing with. The invitation surprised Michael, who was accustomed to being sought out for business opportunities rather than genuine human connection. I'd like that. 20 minutes later, they sat in a nearby cafe where Michael found himself talking about his childhood with honesty he rarely shared with anyone. Sarah was diagnosed with severe asthma when she was 6, Michael explained, watching Zara color on paper placemats while her mother listened with the focused attention of someone gathering information that might help her child. Emergency room visits, missed school, medications that cost more than our rent. "How did your mother manage it?" Amara asked. "She worked 3 jobs, sold everything valuable we owned, and somehow kept us believing that things would get better," Michael said, his admiration for his mother evident in every word. "She died when I was 22, but she lived long enough to see Sarah graduate high school and start college." The story explained Michael's immediate connection to Amara's situation. He'd watched his own mother make identical sacrifices with identical courage. "What happened to Sarah?" Amara asked gently. "She became a respiratory therapist," Michael said with obvious pride. "Works at Children's Hospital, helps kids with breathing problems. Says she wants to be the person she needed when she was Zara's age." Amara felt tears threatening as she realized this stranger understood not just her current crisis, but the long-term challenges of raising a child with chronic health issues. "Michael," she said quietly, "I have to ask, how can you afford to give away $500 like it's nothing? That's more than I make in a month." The question forced Michael to confront the gap between his current circumstances and the childhood experiences that had shaped his
"I got
values.
lucky
in business," Michael said carefully, avoiding details that would reveal the extent of his success. "Made some good investments that paid off. But money only matters if you can use it to help people who remind you of where you came from." "What kind of business?" Amara pressed, sensing there was more to Michael's story than he was revealing. "Software development," Michael replied truthfully. "I created some programs that companies found useful." The understated description of building a billion-dollar tech empire made Amara smile at what she interpreted as modest characterization of entrepreneurial success. "Well, your software success just saved my daughter's life," Amara said with gratitude. That made Michael uncomfortable because she had no idea how little $500 meant to his overall wealth. "Mama," Zara interrupted, "can Mr. Michael come to dinner sometime? He seems lonely, and you always say we should share with people who need friends." The child's perception of Michael's emotional isolation was more accurate than any business analysis he'd ever received, and her instinctive invitation touched something in him that professional relationships had never reached. "Zara, Mr. Michael probably has important things to do," Amara said diplomatically, not wanting to impose on someone who'd already been incredibly generous. "Actually," Michael said, surprising himself, "I'd like that very much, if you're sure it's not too much trouble." As they exchanged phone numbers and made plans for a simple dinner that represented far more than food sharing, Michael realized he was entering territory that wealth had never navigated for him, genuine friendship with people who valued him for character rather than resources, and the possibility that helping Amara and Zara might provide the family connection he'd been missing since his mother and sister had moved to different cities for their careers. The question was whether Michael could maintain authentic relationships built on the person he was rather than the empire he'd built, and whether Amara would still welcome his friendship when she eventually discovered that his software success had made him one of the wealthiest men in Michigan. 2 weeks later, Michael sat in Amara's modest apartment, helping Zara with math homework, while Amara prepared dinner in the cramped kitchen. The scene felt more like home than his $12 million penthouse ever had, but guilt was eating at him as his deception about his wealth grew more complicated with every shared meal and every moment of genuine connection. "Mr. Michael," Zara said, looking up from her multiplication problems, "how come your software business lets you visit us so much? Don't you have to go to work?" The innocent question hit Michael like a punch. He'd been claiming flexible work schedule to explain his constant availability, but an 8-year-old's logic was exposing holes in his carefully constructed story. "I'm my own boss," Michael replied carefully, "so I can make my own hours." "That's cool," Zara said, accepting the explanation with childhood trust that made Michael's deception feel worse rather than better. "When I grow up, I want to work for myself too." From the kitchen, Amara called out with obvious stress, "Michael, I need to ask you something difficult." Michael joined her near the stove, seeing tension in her posture that hadn't been there during their previous dinners together. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Zara's having complications with her asthma," Amara said quietly, her voice breaking. "The doctor wants to try a new treatment, but it's not covered by my insurance. We're talking about $40,000 for the full course." Michael felt his heart stop. $40,000 was pocket change to him, but to Amara it represented an impossible mountain of debt that could destroy her financial stability for years. "There has to be assistance programs," Michael said, knowing he was stalling while his mind raced through ways he could help without revealing his true financial situation. "I've applied to everything," Amara replied with exhausted desperation. "Patient advocacy programs, pharmaceutical company assistance, hospital charity care. We're either over income limits or there are waiting lists months long." Michael watched the woman who'd become important to him, facing the same kind of impossible choice his own mother had navigated, but now he possessed the power to eliminate her crisis completely. "Amara," Michael said carefully, "what if I could help with the cost?" "Michael, you already saved us with Zara's medication," Amara replied firmly. "I can't accept $40,000 from someone who's been kind enough to share our dinner table. That's not friendship, that's charity that would change our entire relationship." The refusal was exactly what Michael had feared. Amara's pride and independence wouldn't allow her to accept help that felt disproportionate to their supposed circumstances. What would you do if you could solve someone's crisis immediately, but doing so would expose deception that might destroy the authentic relationship you've built with them? Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is the thing that risks losing the person you're trying to help. "What about a loan?" Michael suggested desperately. "From what bank?" Amara asked with bitter recognition of her limited options. "I work 2 part-time jobs without benefits, live paycheck to paycheck, and have no collateral except a grandmother's necklace that's worth maybe $200. No legitimate lender would give me $40,000. Michael felt trapped between his desire to help and his fear of revealing wealth that would fundamentally alter their relationship dynamic. "There might be other options," he said vaguely. "Michael," Amara said with growing suspicion, "you keep suggesting solutions like money isn't a problem. How exactly does your software business generate enough income that you can casually discuss $40,000 medical expenses?" The direct question forced Michael to confront the moment he'd been dreading. Amara's intelligence was connecting dots that revealed the impossibility of his claimed financial circumstances. "I've been successful," Michael replied weakly. "How successful?" Amara pressed. "Because successful enough to loan money for coffee is different from successful enough to discuss $40,000 like it's a reasonable possibility." Michael stood at the crossroads where continued deception would require increasingly elaborate lies, but honesty might cost him the most authentic relationship he'd experienced since childhood. "Amara, there's something I haven't told you about my business," Michael began, his heart pounding as he prepared to risk everything they'd built together. "Mama, Mr. Michael," Zara called from the living room. "There's someone on TV who has the same name as Mr. Michael." Both adults rushed to the living room, where the evening news was featuring a story about Sterling Tech Solutions' latest expansion project, complete with footage of Michael in a boardroom and graphics showing his company's billion-dollar valuation. Michigan's youngest tech billionaire, Michael Sterling, announced today that his company will create 5,000 new jobs, the reporter continued. But her voice faded into background noise as Amara stared at the screen, then at Michael, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to something approaching betrayal. "That's you," Amara whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're not just successful at software development. You're a billionaire." Michael felt his carefully constructed world collapsing as Amara processed the magnitude of his deception. "Mama, is Mr. Michael famous?" Zara asked innocently, unaware that her question had just exposed lies that threatened to destroy the most important relationship in Michael's life. "Yes, baby," Amara said quietly, her eyes never leaving Michael's face. "Mr. Michael is very, very famous and very, very rich, and apparently very, very good at lying to people who trusted him." As the weight of Michael's deception settled over their small apartment like a suffocating blanket, both he and Amara realized They were facing the moment when authentic connection collided with fundamental dishonesty, and when the very wealth that could solve all their problems might cost Michael the family he'd found in their friendship. A family that had accepted him for who they thought he was, rather than what he actually owned. "Get out," Amara said, her voice deadly quiet as she turned off the television and faced the man she'd thought she knew. "Get out of my home right now." "Amara, please, let me explain," Michael began, but she cut him off with fury that had been building since the news report revealed his true identity. "Explain what? That you've been lying to us for weeks? That you let my daughter get attached to you while you were playing some kind of twisted game with our lives?" Amara's voice rose with each word, her pain transforming into protective rage. Zara looked between the adults with growing confusion and fear. "Mama, why are you yelling at Mr. Michael?" "Because Mr. Michael has been lying to us, baby," Amara said, trying to control her voice for her daughter's sake while her eyes blazed with betrayal. "He's not who he said he was." "I never lied about caring about you and Zara," Michael said desperately. "Everything else might have been complicated, but my feelings for your family are completely real." "Your feelings?" Amara laughed bitterly. "Michael, you're a billionaire who watched me pawn my grandmother's necklace for medicine money. You sat in this apartment eating my food, playing with my daughter, listening to me worry about bills, all while knowing you could solve every problem I have with pocket change." The accusation hit Michael like a physical blow because he recognized its accuracy. His deception had turned their relationship into performance art, where he held all the power while pretending they were equals. "I wanted to help you from the beginning," Michael protested. "But every time I tried, you refused because you said it would change our relationship. I was trying to respect your independence." "By lying to me," Amara shot back, "by making me feel grateful for $500 from someone who probably spends that much on lunch, by letting my daughter believe she made a friend instead of a charity case." What happens when good intentions collide with devastating deception, and someone realizes they've been performing in a play they never auditioned for? Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone is pretend to be their equal when you hold all the power. "Mr. Michael," Zara said, tears starting to flow as she sensed the adult conflict threatening her secure world. "Are you going away like Daddy did?" The question broke something in Michael's chest as he realized his deception had created exactly the kind of abandonment scenario that Zara's absent father had already traumatized her with. "Zara, I would never abandon you," Michael said, kneeling to her level despite Amara's obvious fury. "That's not your decision to make," Amara said sharply. "You don't get to promise my daughter anything when you've built our entire relationship on lies." Michael stood, seeing in Amara's expression the complete destruction of trust that had taken weeks to build and seconds to shatter. "I know I handled this wrong," Michael said, his voice carrying desperation of someone watching their most important relationship disintegrate. "But my feelings for you and Zara haven't changed. I still want to help with her medical treatment." "Help?" Amara's voice cracked with emotional exhaustion. "Michael, you don't want to help. You want to control. You want to be the hero who saves the poor single mother and her sick child. You want to feel good about yourself by solving problems you could have solved the day we met." The psychological accuracy of her assessment devastated Michael because he recognized the truth buried in his supposedly altruistic motivations. "That's not true," Michael replied weakly. "Isn't it?" Amara challenged. "You spent weeks watching me struggle with decisions you could have eliminated instantly. You let me worry about my daughter's health while you decided whether I deserved your help. That's not love, Michael. That's emotional manipulation." Michael felt his world collapsing as Amara's words forced him to confront how his wealth had corrupted his ability to form authentic relationships based on equality rather than benevolent control. "Mama, I don't understand," Zara said, clinging to her mother's leg while looking at Michael with confusion that broke his heart. "Why can't Mr. Michael help us anymore?" "Because we don't need help from people who lie to us," Amara replied, though her voice softened when addressing her daughter. "We take care of ourselves, remember?" "But what about my medicine?" Zara asked with 8-year-old logic, that went straight to the practical implications of rejecting Michael's potential assistance. Amara's face crumpled as she realized that her anger at Michael's deception was creating consequences that would directly impact her daughter's health and future. "We'll figure it out," Amara said with determination that felt more like denial. "We always figure it out." Michael watched this exchange, understanding that his deception had created an impossible situation where accepting his help felt like accepting exploitation, but rejecting his help meant Zara might not receive medical treatment that could dramatically improve her quality of life. "Amara," Michael said quietly, "I know you don't trust me anymore, and I understand why, but please don't let Zara suffer because of my mistakes. Let me pay for her treatment, and then I'll disappear from your lives completely if that's what you want." "What I want," Amara replied with exhausted finality, "is for people to be honest with me. What I want is to not have to wonder whether everyone who enters our lives is performing some elaborate deception for their own entertainment." As Michael prepared to leave, knowing that his revelation had destroyed the most meaningful relationship he'd ever experienced, Zara broke free from her mother's side and ran to him. "Mr. Michael, are you really rich enough to help me breathe better?" she asked, with the directness that only children could manage in emotionally complex situations. Michael looked at this brave little girl who'd become like a daughter to him, then at her mother who'd trusted him with the most precious parts of her life. "Yes, Zara," Michael said honestly, "I am. But your mama is right to be angry with me for not telling you that from the beginning." As he walked toward the door, Michael realized he was facing the same choice his deception had been designed to avoid. Whether his love for this family was strong enough to respect their autonomy, even when it meant accepting rejection, or whether his wealth and power had taught him to see consent as optional when he was convinced his intentions were good. The question now was whether Michael could find a way to help Zara without further manipulating Amara, or whether his betrayal had created permanent damage that no amount of money could repair. 6 months later, Michael sat in the waiting room of Detroit Children's Hospital, nervously checking his phone for updates he wasn't sure he'd receive. Through the window he could see the new wing his foundation had funded, the Sterling Family Respiratory Center, where cutting-edge asthma treatments were provided regardless of patients' ability to pay. "Mr. Sterling?" Dr. Sarah Martinez approached with a smile that carried good news. "I wanted to update you on our young patient's progress." Michael looked up hopefully. "How is she?" "Zara's responding beautifully to the new treatment protocol," Dr. Martinez reported. "Her lung function has improved 60% since we started, and she hasn't had a single emergency room visit in 4 months. Relief flooded through Michael, though it was tempered by the knowledge that he was receiving updates about Zara's health through medical staff rather than from her family directly. "And her mother?" Michael asked carefully. "Mrs. Williams has been incredible," Dr. Martinez replied. "She's actually volunteering in our family support program now, helping other parents navigate the system. Says she wants to give back to the place that saved her daughter's life." Michael nodded, understanding that Amara had found ways to contribute that preserved her dignity, while acknowledging the help she'd received. He'd structured the hospital program specifically to avoid identifying him as the benefactor, allowing families to receive assistance without the complications of knowing it came from someone in their personal lives. "Doctor, has Mrs. Williams asked about the Foundation's funding sources?" Dr. Martinez smiled with gentle understanding. "She's focused on helping other families access care. I think she's chosen to be grateful for the program's existence without investigating its origins too deeply." After leaving the hospital, Michael drove through his old neighborhood, where he'd arranged to meet someone who'd become crucial to navigating the most important relationship of his life. "Uncle Michael!" Sarah Sterling ran to greet her older brother, her medical scrubs and hospital badge identifying her as one of Detroit Children's Hospital's most respected respiratory therapists. "Sarah," Michael said, embracing the sister whose childhood asthma had taught him that love meant doing whatever it took to help family breathe easier. "How did it go?" "Zara's amazing," Sarah replied with professional admiration mixed with personal understanding. "Bright, brave, and so curious about how her treatments work. Reminds me of myself at that age." They sat on the bench where Michael had been waiting, both contemplating the complexity of situations where good intentions created ethical dilemmas that money couldn't solve. "She asked about you," Sarah said gently. Michael's heart jumped. What did she say? She wanted to know if the nice man who helped them at the pawn shop ever comes to visit sick kids at the hospital, Sarah explained. "I told her that some people help from far away, but that doesn't mean they don't care." What happens when love requires accepting that the people you want to protect might be better served by your absence than your presence? Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the space to rebuild their life without the complications your involvement would create. "Sarah, I've been thinking about something," Michael said. "What if I could help Zara and her mother without them knowing it was me? Create opportunities that feel earned rather than given." "What kind of opportunities?" Sarah asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected her brother's latest scheme to help from the shadows. "Amara wants to go back to school to become a teacher," Michael explained. "What if the hospital started an educational assistance program for families of patients, scholarships for parents who want to work in healthcare or education?" Sarah studied her brother's face, seeing the same determination that had driven him to build a business empire, partly motivated by ensuring their family never faced medical crises without resources again. "Michael, you can't orchestrate someone's entire life from behind the scenes," Sarah said with gentle firmness. "At some point, authentic relationships require honesty and mutual choice." "But what if she never forgives me?" Michael asked, voicing the fear that had kept him away for 6 months. "Then you respect that choice," Sarah replied. "But what if she does? What if she's spent 6 months missing the friendship you shared, despite the hurt your deception caused?" Before Michael could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Sterling, this is Amara Williams. Could we meet? Zara has something she'd like to say to you." Michael stared at the message, his heart pounding, as he realized the family he'd lost through deception might be offering him a chance at redemption he'd never dared hope for. 2 hours later, Michael sat in the same cafe where he'd first learned about Amara's dreams of becoming a teacher. Across from him, Zara fidgeted with excitement, while her mother watched with an expression that mixed wariness with something that might have been hope. "Mr. Michael," Zara announced with 8-year-old formality, "I want to thank you for helping me breathe better, even though you did it secretly." Michael's throat tightened. "How did you know it was me?" "Because Miss Sarah at the hospital has the same eyes as you, and when she talks about her brother who helps sick kids, she sounds like how Mama used to sound when she talked about you," Zara explained with logic that impressed both adults. Amara spoke for the first time. "Michael, I've spent 6 months being angry about your deception, but I've also spent 6 months watching my daughter thrive because someone cared enough to help her, even if that help came in complicated ways." "I'm sorry," Michael said simply. "I'm sorry for lying, for manipulating our relationship, and for making you feel like charity cases instead of friends I genuinely cared about." "I know," Amara replied, "and I'm sorry for not giving you the chance to explain before I threw you out. My pride was more important to me than understanding your motivations." They sat in silence that felt less uncomfortable than contemplative, both processing how hurt and healing could coexist in relationships that mattered enough to survive mistakes. "Mama's going to be a teacher," Zara announced proudly. "She got into Wayne State University with a scholarship for parents of hospital patients." Michael smiled, recognizing Amara's achievement, while understanding she'd earned it through her own merit, rather than his manipulation. "That's wonderful," Michael said genuinely. "You'll be an amazing teacher." "The scholarship program was your idea, wasn't it?" Amara asked directly. Michael nodded, no longer interested in deception that had cost him too much already. "Thank you," Amara said simply, "for helping in ways that let me maintain my dignity while giving Zara the future she deserves." As they talked through the complications of the past and possibilities for the future, Michael realized that authentic relationships couldn't be built on deception, but they could survive honesty that came from love rather than manipulation. "Mr. Michael," Zara said as they prepared to leave, "can we be a family again? Not a pretend family, but a real one where everyone tells the truth?" Looking at this brave little girl and her incredible mother, Michael understood that the most valuable thing his wealth had ever purchased wasn't luxury or status. It was the second chance to love people who'd chosen to forgive him despite having every reason not to trust him again. Their story became proof that families could be built on choice rather than blood, that love could survive deception when it was strong enough to demand honesty, and that sometimes the most precious gifts were the relationships that taught you to value people over power, connection over control, and the courage to be vulnerable with people who'd earned the right to see who you really were beneath everything you owned. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Please don't forget to subscribe and click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. And I will see you in the next one.